Welcome to the House of Truth. Today we're continuing our series on the divided kingdom. Last time we looked at the battles of Elijah. And we saw the battles were actually on more than one front. He had a battle with Ahab, who referred to him as the troubler of Israel. But he corrected Ahab that Ahab was the cause of all this trouble for turning against God. He had a battle with the prophets of Baal, which he won decisively, and God answered by fire, destroying, not just devouring the sacrifice, but the altar, the stones, the wood, the altar, and the water that was in the trench he had filled up. Okay, but his main thing was a battle for the hearts of the people of Israel, which he won after God answered by fire. And they rallied behind him and helped him kill the prophets of Baal. But the battles weren't over. His biggest battle was yet to come. When Jezebel threatened him, he ran off down into Judah, the southern kingdom, at the southern end, left a servant there, and left Judah out and went out in the wilderness. And an angel appeared to him. An angel appeared to him, fed him twice, and sent him down to Horeb, so they could finally resolve this inner battle that was going on. 3 times he said, basically, no one loves you but me in Israel, God. I'm the only prophet left, and they're trying to kill me. He said this despite the evidence that Obadiah had told him that there were 100 prophets of God. He had saw with his own eyes how the people of Israel turned away from Baal towards God after answering with fire. But this was a stronghold in his mind that he developed from 3.5 years of living in exile from the people of Israel. First by the brook where the ravens fed him, and then with the widow woman of Zarephath. And despite all the evidence to the contrary, could not get rid of this victim mentality. And he just wanted to lay down and die. And after he got to Horeb, his plan was just stay there. Horeb's another name for Sinai, and just stay there. But God brought him there for a particular purpose. He had to remind the people of Israel who they were when he took 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel. God brought him to Horeb to remind him who he was, where his predecessor, Moses, had went through a similar thing where Israel had rejected God. Moses interceded for him. He went on a supernatural fast like Elijah. And God gave him a new assignment, and then finally got this wrong idea out of his head by God himself telling him he had reserved of those who had not bowed the knee to Baal and kissed the Asherah poles or whatever it was, and not submitted to this idol worship at all. Out of those, he reserved 7,000, even though some prophets had been killed. Some followers had been killed. God kept back 7,000 to be a remnant. And we concluded that remnant by showing in the text in Romans, is a remnant of Israel, has absolutely nothing to do with being a remnant of the church, which doesn't even make any sense. Or that remnant being the church, which doesn't make any sense. Remnant of what? And it's about how God, to this day, has always kept a remnant of Israel. And there's always been Jewish believers from the time of Yeshua forward. Now today, we're looking at the judgments against Ahab. And understanding them is rooted here in Leviticus 25, verse 23 through 24. The land shall not be sowed forever. The land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me. In all the land of your possession, you shall grant a redemption for the land. Okay, so notice the land is mine. Once you are strangers, soldiers with me. As another translation puts it perhaps a little more modern terms, the land belongs to me. You are but my tenants. And that's the ideal here. Israel is strangers in the land, in the promised land, because that land is God set aside from all the earth for himself. And they don't own it. They are strangers, just like the strangers, the uncircumcised live among them. And soldiers, those are just passing through Israel. And they're just sojourners on this earth. Abraham was just a pilgrim on this earth. We all are in this time. So, in all the land your possession, or grant a redemption for the land. They could not be sold forever because they did not own it. In the day, it's the same thing. Solomon tried to give as payment some of the cities of Israel to Huram, who didn't like him and took something else for payment instead. But Solomon set a bad precedence there because it wasn't his to give away. Those cities belonged to the Lord. And today, no one has a right to do this. Not even the government, not the people of Israel, don't have a right to give away even 1 square inch or 1 square centimeter or millimeter, for that matter, of the promised land. It does not belong to them. Therefore, they cannot sell it. And they've tried to buy peace with it, land for peace. And all they did was give up land that wasn't theirs, and they didn't get peace because it wasn't of God. These people became thorns in their eyes, thorns in their eyes, and scourges in their sides, as the word had said they would if they did this sort of thing. So there'd be a redemption for the land, so they can effectively rent it. We read through the rest of this in 25. We'd see that when they sell it to someone, they can redeem it. In the year of Jubilee, they haven't redeemed it by then. It comes back to them. The only thing it can't be redeemed, you have 1 year to redeem property sold in the city, and you have to pay back what the person gave you for it, give them back the money. After that, it becomes theirs forever. And this is where foreigners are going to be able to live in Israel in the future, in these walled cities, but not in the farmland out there at all, because they are also strangers and sojourners with Israel, the way Israel is strangers and sojourners with them. So Israel has no right to sell the land. Israel has no right to negotiate with the land. It doesn't belong to them. It'd be like me negotiating with someone for the Trump Tower. There's just no legal basis for me to do that, and neither is there for Israel. Now in 1 Kings 15, 18 through 20, read the following about another violation of this. Then Asa took silver and gold that was left in the treasures of the house of the Lord, the treasures of the king's house, delivered into the hands of his servants, and King Asa sent them to Benhadad, the son of Tabrimon, the son of Hezion, king of Syria, that dwelt at Damascus, saying, "There is a league between me and you, between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent a present of silver and gold. Come and break your league with Baasha, king of Israel, that may depart from me." So Benhadad hearkened unto King Asa, and sent the captains of the host which he had against the cities of Israel, and smote Ijon Dan, Abel-Beth Maacah, Abel-Beth Maacah, and all of Kinnereth, with all the land of Naphtali. Okay, Benhadad, as indicated, had been in league with had been in league with the southern kingdom, and we saw that before, how Israel was sandwiched between Judah, the southern kingdom, and Syria. Now Judah, the southern kingdom, was sandwiched between Israel, the northern kingdom, and Egypt, because their ally of the northern kingdom was Egypt. Well, Benhadad, for whatever reason, the bribe perhaps, switched sides. So Asa sent him a gift to come back to his side. Benhadad's here as an opportunist, and sure. So not only does he take that money as part of his payment, but he also takes all this land, and unwittingly, unintentionally, Asa sold him Naphtali, not knowing he's going to do this. There's Dan, this area of Manasseh, all the way around the Galilee. He took the Kinnereth is another name for the Galilee. It means harp. It's roughly the shape of a harp. That's why it's called that. Okay, so he unwittingly done this, and of course that was displeasing to the Lord, and it's going to have repercussions later, as we'll see today. In 2 Chronicles 16, verses 7 through 9, we read the following. And at that time, Hanani the seer came to Asa, king of Judah, and said to him, because you have relied on the king of Syria, and have not relied on the Lord your God, therefore the host of the king of Syria has escaped out of your hand. Were not the Ethiopians and the Lubians a huge host with many chariots and horsemen? Yet, because you did rely on the Lord, he delivered them into your hand. For the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the earth to show him strong on behalf of them whose heart is perfect towards him. Herein you have done foolishly. Therefore from henceforth you shall have wars. Remember, Asa had become complacent. And we saw so in the northern kingdoms. Baasha was supposed to get rid of the idols Jeroboam set up, and really, God's intention was for him to turn Israel back to him, and he just became complacent about doing it. He just left things as they were because it was easier, because a lot of people would have been against it, and he was just, became complacent and went along with it, and was destroyed for it. Well, Asa here had become complacent also, as we saw in the complacent kings, and Zerah the Ethiopian came with a million man army and a few chariots, but the Lubians, which we call Libyans today, joined him with a great number of chariots as well. And the Lord delivered in their hand. They wiped out all of them. Well, the Lord's displeased with Asa here for his complacency and for him not relying on the Lord. He just got complacent about his relationship with the Lord. He kept looking to people he could see, and so the Lord he couldn't see. And God was looking to try to show himself strong for him, but his heart was not perfect towards him. He wasn't worshiping idols, and he hadn't done any of that stuff. But he quit really relying on the Lord the way he had when he was younger. So God's intention here was plain, that he was using this whole thing as a trap, bringing them down within 10 miles of Jerusalem, where it looked like they were winning. They took back the cities, Ephraim and whatever cities that Asa's father had taken. They'd been taken from them previously. They took most of Benjamin and were eyesight 10 miles or so of Jerusalem, but it was all a trap laid out by the Lord, and Asa didn't inquire of the Lord and messed this up. And the intention was because this Benhadad, God knew his character. He switched sides. He was a traitor, really. And like Judas, he was ready to be a traitor again for money. Okay? So God's entire plan was to get rid of him and his army, so they wouldn't be a problem in the future to either Israel, the northern kingdom, or Judah. That brings us where we're at today. In 1 Kings 21 through 4, we're going to read about this Benhadad again many years later. And Benhadad the king gathered all of his hosts together. There were 32 kings with him, and horses and chariots, and went and besieged Samaria and warred against it. And he sent messengers to Ahab, king of Israel, into the city and said to him, Thus says Benhadad, Your silver and your gold is mine, your wives also, and your children, even the goodliest, are mine. And the king of Israel answered and said, My lord, O king, according to your saying, I am yours and all I have. Well, here's Benhadad now turning on Israel once again in their weakened state, and we'll see how weak they are in a little bit here. And is demanding all of Ahab's money, silver and gold, and he wants to take his wives and his children, the goodliest ones, the best looking or most intelligent or whatever, and put them to use for his purposes. And Ahab knows he's in a weak position and is willing to submit to this, to have peace with this guy, because he is, it doesn't look good for him if he goes to war with this guy. We'll see why later. In 1 Kings 20, verse 5 through 6, we're going to look at Benhadad's response to Ahab accepting the terms. The messengers came again and said, Thus spake Benhadad, All I have said to you, you shall deliver me silver and gold, your wives, your children. Yet I will send my servants to you tomorrow this time. They shall search the house and the house of your servants, and it shall be whatever is pleasant in your eyes. They shall put in their hand and take it away. Okay, Ahab, he gave his offer. He negotiated. He made his terms to Ahab. When Ahab accepts him, his mindset is, this guy's weak, so now he's just asking for more. And it's kind of like the Iranians today in this war, in the IRGC, in this war between the U.S. and Iran. They made an agreement. They broke it right away concerning the Straits, and they think, honestly, if the U.S. does not destroy them, they declare themselves the winner. Their mindset in the Gulf states around them is, if the U.S. doesn't wipe them off the face of the earth, there's only one reason. It's because the U.S. was too weak to do so. So therefore, they think the U.S. is weak because it hasn't done that, and it keeps upping its demands. Even though they're really in no position to make demands. But that's their mindset. Because they think, surely if the U.S. was strong to wipe us out, they would have already done it. Well, so Ahab can see where this... So Benhadad's doing that same sort of thing to Ahab. We're going to look at his response to that. In 1 Kings, we continue on 1 Kings 20, verse 7 through 9. And the king said to all the elders of the land, and said, Mark, I pray you, and see how this man seeks mischief. For he sent unto me for my wives, my children, my silver, my gold, and I denied him not. All the people and the elders said to him, Hearken not to him, nor consent. There he said to the messengers of Benhadad, Tell my lord the king, all you send for your servant, the first I'll do, but this thing I may not do. And the servants departed and brought him word again. Okay, the elders of the people can see where this is going. Benhadad's just going to keep going and going and going and taking and taking and taking. And who knows, at the end, maybe just kill them all anyways. So he's telling them, you've got to stand up to this guy. And notice, the goodness of his wives undoubtedly included Jezebel. It's interesting. He has wives, but the only one that's we're ever told about is Jezebel, and we'll see later. It didn't seem to bother Jezebel, and perhaps she would have thought Benhadad was an upgrade at the time, because Ahab's kingdom is in a weak position, and Benhadad's is clearly stronger at this moment. So Ahab stands up to this guy because he can see where it's going, and he sees there's really no other option. It's either just give him everything and hope he doesn't kill him, which he might do anyways, or stand up against him. And that's kind of the way it is with bullies sometimes. If you give them a little, they'll keep wanting more, and really all you can do is stand up against them, where they'll just keep going and going and going. They're looking for an easy target, and they're bullies because they're cowards. Because they believe this will work on everyone because it would work on them. So Ahab here is undoubtedly surprised the king here, Benhadad here with this response. We're going to look at how Benhadad responds to that. In 1 Kings 20, verse 10 through 12. And Benhadad sent to him and said, the gods do so unto me, and more also, if the dust of Samaria shall suffice for the handfuls, for all the people that follow me. And the king answered and said, tell him, let him not that gird on his harness boast himself as he that puts it off. And it came to pass, when Benhadad heard this message, as he was drinking, he and the kings of the pavilion, he said to his servants, set yourself in array. And they set themselves in array against the city. Okay, so Benhadad swears by his God. And notice he's bragging here. He's bragging to destroy Samaria down to nothing, down to dust. And he's got so many people with him that after that's done, they're not even able to be able to grab a handful of dust. Fill both hands with dust of Samaria, because there's just so many of them. But Ahab's, now this expression just means today we would say, don't brag about it till you've done it. That's what he's telling. Boasting, girding on the harness refers to putting a harness on the horse to go to war. Taking it off refers to after the fact. So don't brag about it till you've done it, so he tells his response. So Benhadad, notice he's drinking. They're drinking alcohol. And he orders the army to go set itself in array against the city. And they do that. Now, in 1 Kings 20, verse 13 through 14, we're going to see Yahweh, the Lord God of Israel, intervene. And behold, there came a prophet to Ahab, king of Israel, saying, thus says the Lord, have you seen all this great multitude? Behold, deliver into your hand this day, and you shall know that I am the Lord. And Ahab said, by whom? And thus said the Lord, even the young men of the princes of the provinces. He said, who shall order the battle? He said, you. Okay. Now notice, then you shall know that I am the Lord. Now you think after seeing the fire come out of heaven, devour the sacrifice of the wood, the stones, and the water in the trench, that Ahab would have already known he was the Lord. But somehow he's a slow learner, like people of Israel, and people, and I would say people in the world generally are, not just limited to the people of Israel. So I know he's going to use the young men of the provinces. Okay. The young men, I'm not going to send the princes out, the ones with experience, for the young men without the experience. Yes, they have more strength, but they lack wisdom. Who's to set the battle in order? Who shall order the battle, put things in order to start, is Ahab himself. And generally Ahab's probably farmed this out to a general. Again, using the inexperience. Why? So they can't say later it was because of their their experience and skill. Now we continue on in 1 Kings 20, verse 15 through 18. They numbered the young men of the prince of the provinces, and they were 232. And after them he numbered all the people and the children of Israel, being 7,000. They went out noon, but Benhadad was drinking himself drunk in the pavilions, he and the kings and the 32 kings that helped him. And the young men of the prince of the provinces went out first. And Benhadad sent out, and they told him, saying, there are men come out of Syria. He said, ready to come out for peace, take them alive, or they come out for war, take them alive. Okay, so there's only 232. And notice the entire army of Israel, all I can muster is 7,000. Notice not of the capital of Israel, all the children of Israel. Now, brings the question, what happened to the rest of them? Remember last time they went to war, it went to war against Asa. They lost a big chunk of their army, or last time we saw, I guess it was Asa's father. They'd lost a big chunk of their army. They still had like 180,000 left, something of that nature. Meanwhile, during that same period, Judah went from around 500,000, to twice as big. To twice as big. Well, that famine that God had another purpose in it besides just punishing Israel. Judah, if you remember, we talked about, was under Joshua, was prospering like it had not since the days of Solomon. Not as great as the days of Solomon, but it was the greatest prosperity since those days, because Joshua was doing all these reforms and following the Lord. They weren't just going to starve in Israel where there was no food. They weren't really interested in going outside Israel because they had so many enemies outside of it. They couldn't trust Benhadad to the north, for one. So they flocked down to Judah. So all that's left of the army of Israel, between those who left and those who died in the famine and whatever, is just 7,000. And Benhadad's army is much bigger than that. We'll see how much larger later. But just overwhelmingly larger. So first it's just these 232, and he wants them to be taken alive. And there could be a couple of reasons for that. Hold them as hostages, sacrifice to his gods later, make an example of him, torture him somehow. Who knows was in the mind of this wicked king. But most likely he would use them for leverage and hold them as hostages, at least at first. Then perhaps do one of them other things with them. Okay, we're gonna look at how this turns out for Benhadad. And we continue on here in 1 Kings 20, verse 19 through 22. So these young men of the prince of the province came out of the city, and the army which followed them. And they slew every one as man, and the Syrians fled, and Israel pursued them. And Benhadad, the king of Syria, escaped on a horse with a horseman. And the king of Israel went out and smote the horse and the chariots, and slew the Syrians with a great slaughter. And the prophet came to the king of Israel and said, go strengthen yourself and mark, and see what you do. For the return of the year, the king of Syria will come up against you. Okay, so they came out in the army. And remember, he had just ordered his army to take them alive. And that undoubtedly hindered his army. Really, all they could do is start fleeing, which they did. And a great many of them died in this battle. As the king of Israel went out and slew the Syrians with a great slaughter. He sent them first to order the battle, then he was emboldened to go out himself. But he wasn't supposed to lead them anyways, the young men were, which is contrary to the normal way. Normally the kings would be leading them in battle, or their general. But it's not over. Benhadad is up to no good, and this setback, he wasn't destroyed completely. He got away, and he'll be back to cause more trouble because of that. That's his mindset. Unfortunately, like so many people outside of Israel in the Middle East, Many of Israel's neighbors have that same mindset. At least their leaders, the guys with the guns do, and the Gulf states as well. In 1 Kings 20, verse 23 through 27, we continue on, and we see the words of this prophet come to pass. You notice this prophet is not Elijah, just one of the prophets. There's many other. Remember, there's at least 100 left, and perhaps more, but 101 guy hidden. And we don't know how many of that 7,000 that didn't bend their knee to Baal were prophets, but perhaps more than just that 100. Well, let's continue on and see how these words come to pass and what becomes of it. And the servants of the king of Syria, as we read here in 1 Kings 20, verse 23 through 27. The servants of the king of Syria said to them, "Their gods are the gods of the hills, therefore they are stronger than we. Well, let us fight them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they. Do this thing, take the kings away, and do this thing, take the kings away, every man out of his place, and put captains in their rooms. Number you an army like the army you have lost, horse for horse and chariot for chariot. We'll fight against them in the plain, and surely we'll be stronger than they." They hearkened to their voice, and did so. They came to return of the year that Benhadad numbered the Syrians, and went up to Aphek to fight against Israel. And the children of Israel were numbered and present, and went against them. The children of Israel pitched before them like two little flocks of kids. But the Syrians filled the country. Okay, now let's start with what his servants say and this advice he concedes to. At first, they say the first problem is, remember, Samaria was built on a hill. It really should be Samaria, but it was the Shimmer had sold that to Omri to build this new capital for the northern kingdom. And it's set up there on a hill, so they think that God is only a God of the hills. That's the way they had it. And one reason they thought that they were gods of the hills, remember all this idolatry in the high places, where those are on top of hills. They had undoubtedly observed their idols on some of these hills. So they think that their gods up on these hills, these idols, are giving them strength. So they want to get them out of their, if you will, the home field advantage, and get them to a place where they're disadvantaged, the plains. But the second thing is, remember, we had this coalition with these 32 kings, and they're saying, well, what they're basically saying is that these other kings you had hindered us. They were at fault. They weren't really committed the way we would be. So put captains, people from your own, officers from your own people, in their place to take their positions, and replace all their people with your own people. And those two things are going to make us stronger. No relying on foreign mercenaries, and fighting on the plains where their gods up on them hills. They're thinking of those idols, without a doubt, cannot help them. Not understanding that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is not an idol. And that's not why they lost the first time. So they come there and they do this. And notice they filled the country. Two little flocks of kids, baby goats. They look, they're vastly outnumbered here, the children of Israel. In 1 Kings 28 verses, 1 Kings 20, we can see on verses 20 through 30, we see how this battle goes. And there came a man of God and spake to the king of Israel. Thus said the Lord, because the Syrians have said, the Lord is God of the hills, but he's not the God of the valleys. Therefore I will deliver this great multitude in your hand. You shall know that I am the Lord. And they pitched one over against the other 7 days. So it was on the 7th day the battle was joined. And the children of Israel slew of the Syrians 100,000 footmen in one day. And the rest fled to Aphek into the city, and there a wall fell upon 27,000 of the men that were left. And Benhadad fled and came to the city into an inner chamber. Okay, now we see exactly how large his army was. 127,000 of them died, and some didn't. So it's 140,000 is not unreasonable total. And so Israel was outnumbered 20 to 1, thereabouts, perhaps 19 to 1, but around 20 to 1. And God does this because why does he care what the Syrians think? The same reason he cared when Moses was defending Israel, when Moses was interceding for Israel. What will the heathen think? Because at the end of the day, it's about bringing the knowledge of God to the entire world. He doesn't want the Gentiles thinking the Lord God of Abraham, the Lord God of Israel, is just not up to the task. In Moses' case, they would say he brought them out of Egypt, but he couldn't bring them into the promised land. So God let destroy that generation, but brought the next one in. Well, here's the same sort of thing. God doesn't want them thinking he's like those idols that are up on the hills. He wants the Syrians to know that he is God, and there is no God beside him. And he's the God of the mountain, just like he's the God of the valley. And people don't know that. They don't need to know that in their own life. God is God when things are going well, and when you're in a high place, and when they're going terrible, and you're in a low place. He hasn't abandoned you, hasn't forsaken you, his care for you and his ability to deliver you is not dependent upon your circumstances. And that's part of what he's wanting to get across, not just to those Syrians who escape, like Benhadad flees again, he's alive again to cause trouble again, but to the people of God, the people of Israel as well. Okay, so he's in this inner chamber. He's went there and he's put himself fortified. Where at least if Israel's come get him, they're gonna have a tough fight on their hands. Well, in 1 Kings 20, verse 31 through 34, we see what he does next. And his servant said to him, "Behold, we have heard the kings of the house of Israel are merciful kings. Let us, I pray you, put on sackcloth on our loins, and ropes upon our head, and go out to the king of Israel. Peradventure he will save your life." So they girded the sackcloth on their loins, put ropes on their heads, and came to the king of Israel and said, "Your servant Benhadad says, I pray you, let me live." He said, "Is he yet alive? He is my brother." Now the men did diligently observe where anything would come from him, and did hastily catch it. And they said, "Thy brother Benhadad." And he said, "Go bring him me. Go you bring him." And Benhadad came forth to him and caused him to come. And he caused him to come into the chariot. And Benhadad said unto him, "The cities which my father took from your father, I'll restore. You shall make the streets for you in Damascus as my father made in Samaria." Then Benhadad said, "I will send you away with this covenant." And so he made a covenant with him and sent him away. Okay, so they heard that kings were merciful kings. Even their wicked state there, Israel is known for its mercy, and really it is that way today. I mean, that's why the Lord had to tell him with command him over and over again, don't show mercy to the Canaanites. Don't make covenants with them, because it was their natural inclination to be merciful. And that's not a bad thing in itself, but remember the words of Solomon, there's a time for everything. And there's people you have mercy with because they repented, and those you can't because they are just wicked, and it's going to come back to bite you later. You know, like he said, one of the reasons not to make covenants with them because they wouldn't keep in the agreement they made. Just like the IRGC today, and as far as that goes, many of the militant Muslims have this idea of a hudna, where they'll make an agreement, but it's only to buy time. And once they feel they're in a stronger position, they can they'll break that agreement. Well, then the solution is don't make agreements with them. But Ahab is merciful. Doesn't have merciful feel about him. And notice he calls him his brother. He wants to patch up the relationship between him and Benhadad. You know, Benhadad came down there and did all these threatenings. And Benhadad demanded something from him. Now he's going to give him back. He's going to give him back something in return instead. The show, as a show of good faith, even though he probably doesn't have any real good faith. He's going to give him back all that land we talked about. The land that Asa unwittingly gave to Benhadad. And it really started with Benhadad, and this perhaps the son of the Benhadad the second here, because it says his father. Which my father took from your father, took from Omri. Okay, that's another one, but previous to that, they had taken some. He's going to return all that. Okay, so now Israel, remember, Joshaphat had made peace with Ahab, and Israel, the northern kingdom, is going to be reunited, all of it under one king once again. And that really appeals to Ahab. So he takes him up on the deal. As far as making streets, is just what it says. I mean, it shows that they got a close relationship. They're tied together. She'll make streets for you in Damascus, an Israel street or whatever streets, where they're going to have Israeli goods selling and so on and so forth. And his father had done that in Samaria, where Syrian goods and stuff and Syrian merchants were there. And just showing that they're kind of married together. So the covenant here, kind of like a marriage covenant going on, not between a man and a woman, between these two nations. And, just to give you kind of an idea, in 3196, for 3,196 years after Adam was formed out of the dust, this had happened. In Omri's day, Benhadad's father had taken some more, Benhadad the first, we'll assume here, took some more property. And now they're getting it all back, and it's sometime before the death of Ahab, obviously, in 32. So, this situation's gone on, perhaps say 24 years has gone on. Just to give you a rough idea of, of how long the kingdom was not all united. In fact, it was before that even. Joshaphat had taken some of the southern part before that. Asa's predecessor had. So, okay, so now so everything looks good, except no one inquired the Lord about this. So now in 1 Kings 20, verse 35 to 38, we're going to see where the Lord weighs in on this. He's been intervening the whole time. He's going to intervene in this case also. A certain man of the sons of the prophets said to his neighbor in the word of the Lord, "Smite me, I pray you." And the man refused to smite him. And he said to them, "Because you have not obeyed the voice of the Lord, behold, as soon as you are departed from me, a lion shall slay you." As soon as he departed from him, a lion found him and slew him. They found another man and said, "Smite me, I pray you." And the man smote him, so that in smiting he wounded him. So the prophet departed and waited by the king for the king by the way, and disguised himself with ashes upon his face. Okay. Notice its neighbor in the word of the Lord. He let him know this is the word of the Lord. His neighbor knew he was a prophet. But the man refused to smite him, and perhaps why? Because he remembered the words that God had spoken before. I believe it was in the days of Samuel. And often taken out of context and twisted by really false prophets that wouldn't apply to them anyways. touch not the Lord's anointed, nor do his prophets any harm. That was in the days of King David, but I remember if he said about Samuel. I don't know if it's probably one about Samuel, but anyways, come to think of it. But anyways, so he probably had that in mind and was perhaps a little confused, but it was in the word of the Lord. He didn't obey him, and the lion slayed him, just like we saw a short while back, how the old with Jeroboam, how the young prophet had been told not to go back a different way he came, and not to eat inside the land of Israel. And the old prophet told him otherwise. Then, because he didn't obey the word of the Lord, a lion killed him as well. So, in a partial repeat of that incident, we see the same thing. And the Lord's doing this because this is a serious matter. Now, this guy smote him; they wounded him, and this is what this prophet needs to be. He's got disguised his face himself with ashes on his face, a sign of wounding, a sign of mourning, and the wounding is really part of this disguise. And remember, the Lord's setting all this up. He's disguising himself, of course, under the instructions of the Lord. In 1 Kings 20:39 through 43, we read the following. And the king passed by, and he cried to the king. He said, Your servant went out in the midst of the battle, and behold, a man turned aside and brought a man to me, and said, Keep this man. If by any means he be missing, then your life shall be for his life, or else you shall pay a talent of silver. And as your servant was busier here and there, he was gone. The king said to him, So shall your judgment be. You have decided it. And he hasted and took the ashes away from his face. And the king discerned he was one of the prophets. He was of the prophets. He said, Thus says the Lord, because you have let go of your hand a man whom I had appointed to utter destruction, therefore your life shall go for his life, and your people for his people. And the king of Israel went away to his house very heavy and displeased, and came to Samaria. Okay, so keep this man. Now, the wounding was perhaps to look like he'd been in battle. That's what it says. When killed in battle, he got wounded. And they need to bruise something to look the part. Okay? And notice he could redeem his life with silver. We've talked about before, silver is a picture of redemption. Well, without being redeemed, unless Ahab turns to the Lord somehow and seeks redemption, his life's going to go for his life, and your people for his people. And notice that the prophet brought this redemption option. Ahab just went heavy and displeased, no thought of redemption, because that would require repentance to God completely, and he was probably more worried about facing about Jezebel being upset than he was this judgment coming to him. So this is the first of the judgments against Ahab. Now we're going to look at 1 Kings 21, verses 1 through 4, and we're going to read about the second judgment against Ahab. And it came to pass of these things that both the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of the king of Samaria, of Ahab, king of Samaria. And he spoke to Naboth, saying, Give me your vineyard, may have a garden of herbs, because near to my house, and I'll give you a better vineyard in it, or if it seems good, I'll give you the worth of it in money. And Naboth said to Ahab, The Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto you. And Ahab came to his house heavy and displeased, because the word of the Lord which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him, for he said, I'll not give you the inheritance of your fathers. He laid upon his bed and turned his face and would eat no bread. You notice he'd been heavy and displeased here from the word of the Lord. Well, Ahab kind of ruled by his feelings, and that was Elijah's problem. He got things out of order. His feelings his emotions had taken control of his mind instead of the spirit being in control of his mind and putting his emotions in place. Well, Ahab here is very similar in that regard. And so he's refusing to eat. He's sulking, and he's upset because he can't just take this property from this guy. And this guy's acting in will with the word of God, as we saw at the very beginning. The best he could have done was said, I'll take money for it, but you have to give it back to me at the year of Jubilee. Effectively rented it out to Ahab. Because God said you are not to give the inheritance, you're not to sell the land forever. And that's what Ahab was wanting to do here. No mention of redemption. This isn't a house, because if it was a house in the city, he could do that. But this was a vineyard in the city. And Ahab wanted to build a spice garden there. And here's Jezreel up here, and down here is Samaria. I'll give you an idea. But Jezebel's wife came to him and said, why is your spirit so sad, and why do you eat no bread? And he said to her, and perhaps his house is down there in Samaria. We'll see. Because it wasn't uncommon. That's where I was going with this. It's not uncommon for a king to have a Jezreel, to have a summer and winter residence. In fact, many empires had two capitals, a summer and winter capital. And they higher up in elevation, whatever. Generally, with more cooler weather in the summer, they'd go there. The colder weather starts sitting on the higher elevation. They go down to the low elevation where it's warmer, and have a capital there. So the winters wouldn't be so near the winter, the summer would be as harsh. Didn't have air conditioning and heating. They could, have wood heating or whatever, but they couldn't really have air conditioning, just someone fanning them or whatever. So their solution was just to move to where the good weather was, and that's perhaps what's going on here. All right, now we'll go back and pick it up in 21:25. Kings 21, verse 5 through 7. But Jezebel's wife came to him and said, why is your spirit so sad that you eat no bread? He said, because I spoke unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and he said to me, and I said to him, give me your vineyard for money, or else if it please you, I'll give you another vineyard for it. Hence said, I will not give you my vineyard. Jezebel's wife said to him, do you now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread. Let your heart be merry, for I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. Okay, so Jezebel, remember, is from Zidon, and there was no law above the kings like there was in Israel and Judah. Ahab was we'd say more civilized today. Just wasn't going to go take someone's property because he was the king. Well, it wasn't the way it was with Jezebel, where she came from. Remember, she was a princess up there. Her dad would have just took the guy's property and probably killed him or whatever. And she's like, I'll handle this. I'll give you the vineyard. Okay, she wants to sing Ahab's good graces. Well, she wants to have favored him, so keep being beholden to her. So in 1 Kings 21, verse 8 through 10, we're going to see how she plans on doing that. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with a seal and sent the letters to the elders and the nobles that were in his city dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote letters saying, proclaim a fast and set Naboth on high among the people. And set two men, sons of Belial, before him, to bear witness against him, saying, You did blaspheme God and the king, and carry him out and stone him and he may die. So she has this plan, and she's counting on the wickedness of the elders and nobles that are in Jezreel to carry this out. And why blaspheme God and the king? Because both of those blasphemy really isn't just like using the Lord's name in vain. It's speaking ill of God. That's why in the Brit Kadashah of the New Testament, quote in the Old Testament, it says you cause the Gentiles blaspheme God, but in the King James, where it actually is quoting from, it says they profaned his holy name. Okay, spoke ill of it. So, because of the behavior of the people of Israel. But that's way ahead. We'll see it later. So, but these both carried the penalty of death under the law. You could disagree with the king, like Elijah did, the prophet. You could even say anything true, like in the trouble of Israel, when he says something. But what you can't do is speak ill of him about, speak ill of him in a very derogatory manner. So, that's her plot. Now we're going to see how this plot turns out. In 1 Kings 21, verses 11 through 14, read the following. And the men of his city, even the elders and nobles that were inhabitants of his city, did as Jezebel sent to them, and as it was written in the letters which she had sent unto them. They proclaimed a fast, and set Naboth high among the people. There came in 2 men, children of Belial, and sat before him. And the men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth, the friends of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. And they carried him forth out of the city, and stoned him with stones, and he died. They sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. Okay, the people are innocent. They think they're doing the will of God. They don't know what they are doing, just like the Roman soldiers that crucified Messiah. But notice the elders and the nobles are not, just like when Messiah was killed. The elders, or at least many of them, at least enough to at least 31 of them, because you had to have 61 to vote on anything, and you have 31 majority to get they carried out this condemnation of Messiah of the Sanhedrin. They knew Naboth's innocent, just as these elders knew Messiah was innocent. Even Pilate said 3 times, there's no fault in him. But they want to be on Jezebel's good side, perhaps afraid to get on her bad side, and definitely feel like they can get some favor if they're on her good side. So these crooked leaders of the city carry out her plot, and the people unwittingly believing that he really they've had 2 witnesses, and the law says 2 witnesses that he would die under the hand of under 2 witnesses, 2 or 3 witnesses. They carry out the law, not realizing the law has been perverted to murder an innocent man. And her success in this plan looks very successful. In 1 Kings 21, verse 5 through 16, we see what happens next. It came to pass when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, refused to give you for money. For Naboth is not alive, but dead. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, they rose up to go down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. Well, notice Ahab, she never told Ahab anything about this plot. But you would think he might find his timing a little suspicious. But he's kind of got a don't ask, don't tell mentality about this. He's just glad he's getting this vineyard. So he's going down because Samaria is higher in elevation than Jezreel. So he's going down there to take possession of the vineyard. So Jezebel's happy, Ahab's happy. Everyone seemed to be happy except Naboth, who was a man innocently killed. But the Lord's not happy. Just as we saw with David, with the whole terrible thing he did to Uriah the Hittite concerning Bathsheba, looked like it had all sewn up and all was good, but it said the Lord. But then the Lord weighed in, and that's what's going to happen here. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, Arise, go down, meet King Ahab of Israel, which is in Samaria. Behold, he is in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone down to possess it. And you shall speak to him. Thus says the Lord, thou hast killed, have you killed and taken possession? And you shall speak to him, saying, says the Lord, in the place of the dogs lick the blood of Naboth, shall dogs lick your blood, even yours. Okay, so this is a judgment against this is a second judgment against Ahab. That Ahab's going to die some sort of violent death in the same place where Naboth died, a violent death. And just they licked up the blood of Naboth, they're going to lick up the blood of Ahab. Because Jezebel may never told Ahab, but he probably had an ideal. He just figured if he didn't say anything about it and just went along with it, he'd be seen as innocent in the whole matter. But the Lord knows the hearts and knows he wasn't innocent at all. The king, he's king. Samaria is his capital, is the reference there. Remember, this vineyard is actually in Jezreel, and we'll see that again. And Ahab said to Elijah, Have you found me, O my enemy? He answered, I have found you, because you have sowed yourself to work evil in the sight of the Lord. And behold, I will bring evil upon you, and take away your posterity, and cut off from Ahab him that pissed against the wall, him that is left and shut up and left in Israel. I'll make the house of your house like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Naboth, like the house of Baasha, the son of Ahijah, for the provocation wherewith you have provoked me to anger and made Israel to sin. And of Jezebel also spake the Lord, saying, The dog shall eat Jezebel by the wall of Jezreel. Him that dies of Ahab in the city the dog shall eat, him that dies in the field shall the fowls of the air eat. So, notice again my enemy. Not the trouble of Israel this time, my enemy. Well, why is he his enemy? Because when you're God's friend, you're an enemy of the world. You're the enemy of everyone that sold themselves out to evil. You cannot be friends with the world and God both. Friendship with the world makes you the enemy of God, but friendship with God makes you the enemy of the world. And ultimately the God of this world, Satan. And because of what he's done, that first one was about him taking possession. But this one is about the idolatry. The same punishment he brought to Naboth in Jeroboam. In the dies of Ahab, the dog shall eat, and him the fowls. And a mention here of Jezebel, because she was behind the wickedness. She's the one that made up this whole plot that got them both killed. The dog's going to eat her there as well, her flesh. But notice, not generally somewhere, someplace in a city, but by the wall of Jezreel. Very specific where Naboth was from, and perhaps his vineyard was there. So it would appear. In 1 Kings 21, verse 35 through 27, we continue on with this. And there was none like Ahab, which did sell himself to work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up. He did very abominably in following idols, all the things that and according to all the things as did the Amorites, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard these words, that he rent his clothes, and put sackcloth on his flesh, and fasted, and lay in sackcloth, and wept softly. Okay, so Ahab's, first of all, is a character about Ahab. Notice Jezebel's behind the wickedness. All of it. The introducing the Baalims, and the Baal. But notice, he followed according to things that the Amorites said. Remember, God had told him, warned him of the law, when you do, don't think you're going in because of your righteousness, because of their wickedness. When you do what they did, therefore they're being driven out. And if you do what they did, you will also be cast out of the land. Vomited out is actually the exact expression. So, Ahab has now set Israel up for this. And these things include like sacrificing their children and cannibalism and all kinds of things like that, and all kinds of sexual immorality, including having including having sex with animals. And so Ahab's been very, very wickedly, but nonetheless, he's always been kind of, shall I say, maybe soft-hearted and soft-headed both. And he starts fasting. And he's going around softly, meaning he's showing humility. And even how he walks. And we end with this in 1 Kings 21. We ended this in 1 Kings 21, verses 28 through 29. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, See how Ahab humbled himself before me? Because he humbled himself before me, I will not bring this evil in his day, but in his son's day, I'll bring the evil upon his house. So in this third judgment of Ahab against Ahab, it's deferred, it's delayed. Because Ahab humbled himself. And see, this is a point we need to consider here. God didn't take away his punishment completely. And the forgiveness of God doesn't mean you got no punishment. In fact, the mercy of God is told, and we see in the Bible over and over again, is described as us getting less than our sins deserve. The wages of sin is death, specifically eternal death, away from God in the lake of fire. Messiah paid the price so we don't have to have eternal death. But remember the thief on the cross. Messiah himself had said he could call a legion of angels to deliver him from the whole business, from dying on the cross, etc. He could have called that same angel to deliver that thief on the cross that repented. But what happened? He let that thief die. That thief said he was getting what he deserved, acknowledged his sin, acknowledged it. He did not deliver him from everything that sin had brought upon him. And consider Shaul the Apostle Paul. I believe it's in Corinthians, he writes about his sufferings, being shipwrecked 3 times, and that was, by the way, before the one in Acts where he gets shipwrecked. That's a 4th time. Being imprisoned, beaten with rods, a Greek form. That's what the lectors did. Beaten, flogged 39 times, 5 times, 39 40 stripes minus 1, with 39 stripes. So on and so forth, ultimately even killed. But see, every one of those things that happened to him on his missions, he was persecuted more than any other apostle. And the reason is every one of those things that happened to him, every single one of them, he had done to believers before he met Yeshua on the road to Damascus. He said that's why he calls himself the chief of sinners, because he persecuted the church. He went out there committing garden variety sins and going blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'm such a bad sinner, I drank and did this. What made him chief above all those was he persecuted the church. And every single one of those things he did to believers before he met Yeshua on the road to Damascus, happened to him afterwards. This is why he wrote, "Do not be deceived. A man will reap what he sows." Anyone that tells you that just because you're forgiven, you're not going to have any kind of consequences in this life from what you've done is a deceiver. But leaving a word of encouragement, it cuts both ways. Therefore, only sow good things. Because do not be deceived. If you sow good things, you're going to reap good things. It's like any crop. It doesn't come in the day you plant the seed, but it will come up. It will produce, and you will reap a harvest. If you don't faint. Don't grow weary in well-doing. And this makes the words of Messiah make total sense. Bless those that curse you. Why? You're sowing a good thing, blessing. You're going to reap it. Don't be sowing a curse by cursing them back, and you're reaping that. Or trying to take vengeance yourself, because vengeance belongs to the Lord, and you're stealing from the Lord, God of Israel, if you try to take vengeance yourself. Sow a blessing. Pray for those that persecute you. And so on and so forth. So, Ahab's punishment, this final judgment, was lessened for him and delayed to the next generation. And if that generation had humbled itself, the Lord would have kept doing this over and over. And maybe we saw where Israel repented and the Lord relented. So maybe just not at all if they'd kept it up. But as far as Ahab goes, it was taken off of him. His punishment was lessened. He's still going to die a violent death from before. And he's still going to die a violent death from before. And he's still going to have his blood licked up where the dogs licked it up. But this thing about watching his whole household being destroyed, that is not going to happen to him. His punishment will be less than he deserves. So I beseech you, seek after the Lord for his mercy. He's kind and merciful, but he cannot let you go unpunished, because the world must be given the impression that God will just sweep things under the rug like people will. There's got to be some sort of consequences. And secondly, there's got to be some consequences so you learn not to do it. Remember, the rod is for the back of the fool, and the fool's the one who had to learn the hard way. Not the one who heard, and that was sufficient, and grew wiser, and just didn't and avoid the punishment. Whom the Lord loves, he chastises. So he must let you be punished to some degree. So you'll know, and also so the world will see that God is not mocked. That's all I have for this week. Until next week, shalom.